The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the expansive picture windows of the Sterling family's opulent Buckhead residence in Atlanta, yet its warmth failed to penetrate the inherent chill of the cavernous living room. Zanaya Amari Vance knelt on the immaculate marble flooring, diligently polishing away the final speck of dust. Her dark, lustrous hair was confined to a tidy chignon, and her simple, worn work attire made her appear entirely out of sync with the surrounding affluence. She looked more like a domestic helper than Mrs. Sterling, the matriarch of the estate. A sudden, sharp clatter reverberated through the room. A valuable, delicate porcelain teacup lay in fragments beside Zanaya's outstretched hand, tiny, sharp shards dispersed, one drawing a crimson line across the back of her hand. Zanaya remained motionless, her head bowed. From her position on a designer sofa, Diane Cleo Sterling, her mother-in-law, observed her with arms crossed and a gaze as keen as a stiletto. "What in the world do you think you are doing? You possess no skill in proper floor maintenance, or are you so utterly clueless that you failed to notice I was partaking in tea?" Zanaya offered no reply. The hand clutching the cleaning cloth tightened into a fist. She began to gather the broken pieces, attempting to prevent her own blood from marring the polished stone. "Worthless," Diane's voice dripped with unadulterated disdain. "Clean it again and keep cleaning until I deem it satisfactory." Zanaya simply inclined her head. She quietly retrieved a dustpan and a fresh rag. 3 years of marriage had unfortunately rendered her accustomed to this ceaseless cycle of humiliation, verbal abuse, and blatant contempt. At that precise moment, the powerful rumble of a sports car engine sounded from beyond the estate gates, and the grand front doors swung open. Jamal Orion Sterling made his entrance. He was clad in a flawlessly tailored suit, his stature commanding, his features handsome yet austere. As the chief executive officer of the Sterling Group, he was a figure widely admired throughout Atlanta. His gaze swept across the living area, his eyes dismissing Zanaya, kneeling on the floor amidst the scattered porcelain, as if she were mere air, an inconsequential decorative element. Not a flicker of a frown crossed his face. "Jamal, my darling boy, welcome home." Diane's expression transformed instantaneously from severe disapproval to radiant joy. "Come here. Your mother has prepared your favorite seafood gumbo." Jamal merely shook his head and proceeded directly to the bar, pouring himself a generous measure of whiskey. He cast no glance in Zanaya's direction. "Mother, I cannot remain for dinner." He downed the whiskey in a single swift gulp. "Kiana requires my attention." Zanaya's body stiffened. Her hand, occupied with wiping the floor, momentarily faltered. Kiana Sorrell, his exceptionally beautiful and highly competent executive assistant, a woman adored by the entirety of the Sterling family, with the sole exception of Zanaya. Diahan glanced sideways at Zanaya. "Well," she sighed, her voice laden with unspoken meaning, "you truly must resolve that matter once and for all. Our family cannot remain without an heir." She spoke with deliberate loudness. "Look at that dim-witted creature. She cannot even carry a pregnancy to term, and to make matters worse, she is illiterate. If it were not for the late grandfather Theon's insistence before his passing, how could our esteemed family have subjected this household to such degradation?" Each word was a sharp barb, piercing Zanaya's heart. Illiterate. That was the label Jamal Sterling had affixed to her from the very moment she entered his home. 3 years prior, Jamal's grandfather, the venerable Theron, who had saved her life and that of her family during a devastating flash flood in their modest rural community on the outskirts of Columbia, South Carolina, had compelled Jamal to marry her. On his deathbed, he had clasped her hand and assured her that Jamal was not an inherently bad man, merely urging her to exercise patience. He had been mistaken. Jamal uttered no further words. He turned, adjusted the collar of his shirt, and departed. He entered and exited like a fleeting, frigid breeze, never pausing for her. The roar of the car engine sounded once more before fading into the distance. Within the vast expanse of the living room, only Diane and Zanaya remained. "What are you loitering for, you pathetic excuse for a person?" Diahan snapped. "Go to your room, your very presence irritates me." Zanaya lowered her head, her fingers gripping the cloth so tightly her knuckles turned stark white. She rose, meticulously collected the shattered porcelain and the soiled cloth, and then made her way to the service staircase that led to her Spartan attic chamber. For 3 years she had been married, living as a mere servant, an invisible phantom within her own home. In stark contrast to the sterling mansion within the most exquisite restaurant in Atlanta, offering a breathtaking panoramic vista of the illuminated downtown cityscape, the gentle strains of a violin mingled with the delicate clinking of crystal glasses. Jamal Sterling meticulously carved the filet mignon on his plate. Across from him sat Kiana Sell. She was attired in a deep burgundy silk gown that accentuated her fair complexion and curvaceous physique. Her wavy hair cascaded elegantly, and her face bore the hallmarks of expert makeup application. She was the embodiment of the modern, successful woman that any man would covet. Kiana gently placed her fork down, her lovely eyes momentarily veiled with a delicate mist, her voice conveying profound regret. "Jamal," she whispered softly, "I have inconvenienced you again today. I am aware you should be at home with Zanaya, but I was simply overcome with fear." Jamal looked up, and the icy demeanor he exhibited at home instantly melted, replaced by an uncharacteristic tenderness. "What utter nonsense is that? You experienced a nightmare. Of course you were meant to call me." But Kiana bit her lip. "I am apprehensive your mother will make Zanaya's existence even more challenging. When you called earlier, her tone did not sound particularly pleased. She sighed like a delicate bloom buffeted by the wind. I do feel a measure of pity for her. She was accustomed to rural life. Adjusting to a metropolis like Atlanta cannot be easy, and given her inability to read or write, she cannot even converse effectively. She must feel profoundly isolated." Jamal let out a chilling laugh, the tenderness vanishing as swiftly as Zanaya's name was spoken. "Pity her by all means, a simple country girl who, owing to my grandfather's intervention, is afforded the luxury of silk attire. Securing the position of Mrs. Sterling represents the most fortuitous turn of events in her entire existence. She ought to be profoundly grateful, rather than perpetually sporting that mournful expression." He turned his gaze back to Kiana, his eyes regaining their gentle warmth. He retrieved a dark blue velvet box from his jacket pocket. "This is for you." Kiana placed a hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with astonishment. Within the box, a diamond necklace gleamed, featuring a heart-shaped pendant adorned with an exceptionally rare pink diamond. "Kiana, this is the heart of the Atlantic," Jamal declared, his voice brimming with affection. "I acquired it at an auction in London last month. Only you are deserving of such exquisite treasures." Kiana rose, moved around the table, and personally clasped the necklace around her neck. His cool skin brushed against the nape of her neck, causing her to experience a slight shiver. She turned, entwined her arms around his neck, her gaze alight with passion. "Jamal, you are exceedingly kind to me." Her breath, perfumed with an expensive fragrance, brushed against his face. "But I am frightened." "Frightened of what?" he inquired, drawing her closer by her waist. "I fear we shall continue in this fashion indefinitely. I love you, but I do not wish to remain the clandestine other woman forever. I desire to be with you openly." Kana gazed at him, her eyes welling with tears. "So when can I officially become your wife, Jamal?" Her question struck a raw nerve, tapping into the frustration Jamal had been suppressing. Yes, Zanaya Vance, the persistent thorn in his side, his most significant impediment. He loathed her very existence. He detested her silence. He disdained her humble origins and her perceived ignorance. Were it not for the 20% of company shares his grandfather had entrusted to her, he would have banished her from the Sterling family long ago. However, the Sterling Group was currently facing considerable financial distress. Jamal released Kiana and returned to his seat. He gazed out at the brilliant city lights outside the window. Kiana sensed the shift immediately. She resumed her seat. Instead of pressing the issue further, she adopted a tone of concern. The company is encountering difficulties once more, is it not? Regarding that European venture? Jamal nodded. We are experiencing a severe liquidity shortfall. That old fool, Mr. Preston Hayes on the board, is insistent on reviewing the financial records. Kiana frowned. She was far from a mere superficial beauty. Jamal, what if we were to utilize Zanaya's shares? Jamal's eyes darkened ominously. Those shares are held within my grandfather's trust. They can only be accessed if she voluntarily consents to their transfer. Kiana smiled, a knowing smile laden with unspoken implications that Jamal failed to grasp. Have you perhaps overlooked something? She inquired softly. She is incapable of reading or writing. The attic room was frigid and devoid of warmth. It stood in stark opposition to the opulence found downstairs. There were no plush rugs or mahogany furnishings, merely a modest twin bed and an antiquated writing desk. This had been Zanaya Vance's domain for the past 3 years. She silently closed the thin wooden door and slid the bolt into place. The faint click of the latch echoed like a decisive severing of two disparate realities. The instant the door sealed shut, Zanaya's submissive, timorous demeanor evaporated. Her posture, previously slightly hunched in resigned acceptance, straightened. Her eyes, habitually downcast and evasive, lifted. In the dimness, they gleamed sharp and as cold as ice. She reached beneath the bed and retrieved a metal briefcase, meticulously secured with a combination lock. She opened it. Inside, one did not find rural apparel, but rather a custom-designed military-grade secure laptop, a Scapundra model, a device unobtainable through conventional purchase. Zanaya sat at the desk and powered on the computer. The screen did not display the familiar interfaces of Windows or Mac OS, but a proprietary encrypted operating system. After navigating through 3 layers of intricate passwords and retinal verification, the main display illuminated. It was not adorned with online shopping sites or entertainment portals. The entire screen was filled with complex algorithms, dynamic graphs, and global stock market data updated with astonishing frequency. She accessed an end-to-end encrypted email system. The inbox immediately populated with a series of unread messages. Subject: JPM Ariadna. We require your expert opinion regarding the Federal Reserve's forthcoming bond issuance. Subject: FMA Ariadna. The $500 billion rescue package you accurately predicted has faltered. The London market is in utter disarray. Subject: TR. Ariadna, we do not comprehend your analytical model. How did you foresee the Norwegian sovereign fund's divestment? Ariadna, a name whispered with reverence in the clandestine world of finance. She was a living enigma, a shadowy analyst whose identity remained meticulously concealed. An individual who, as a mere teenager, accurately foretold the collapse of Lehman Brothers in the year 2008 and issued a prescient warning regarding the dot-com bubble of 2024. This elaborate charade was undertaken solely to honor a profound promise. Zanaya opened a concealed file. It contained the sole photograph she possessed of herself, alongside an elderly, kind-faced gentleman, Grandfather Theron Sterling, the man who had miraculously saved her life and those of her family during that catastrophic flood years ago. On his deathbed, he had summoned not Jamal but her. Zanaya held his hand, his breathing shallow. I apologize for not raising Jamal with greater wisdom. Arrogance and prejudice have clouded his perception. He fails to recognize your inherent value. Wall Street would readily offer hundreds of millions of dollars for the mere knowledge of Ariadne's identity. They could never conceive that the very Ariadne they so desperately sought was the illiterate wife, Zanaya Vance, residing in an attic room of the Sterling family's Buckhead estate. Not only could she read and write, but she had graduated summa cum laude with a double major in applied mathematics from Harvard and quantitative finance from MIT. She possessed fluency in 7 languages, not merely 5. Should he betray you, Zanaya, you owe him nothing. Wield that sword and the 30% of shares I have discreetly allocated to you in a separate trust, and reclaim all that is rightfully yours. Show absolutely no mercy. 3 years had elapsed. She had extended him numerous opportunities, yet in return, she had received only relentless humiliation, icy indifference, and the constant painful mention of Kiana. Zanaya returned to the screen, activating another window to monitor the Sterling Group's stock performance. It was in a precipitous decline. She could clearly discern the detrimental impact of Jamal's ill-advised investment decisions. His overconfidence had led him to attempt an entry into the European biotechnology market without adequate preparation. The group's liquidity was rapidly diminishing. In a mere 10 minutes, through carefully executed short sell and buyback orders, she could effortlessly stabilize the situation. However, she refrained. The promise made to grandfather Theon still resonated within her. Should he betray you? The betrayal had not yet been unequivocally confirmed. She was still waiting. She scrolled through the emails, her fingers flying across the keyboard, rapidly inputting complex command lines, issuing directives to the world's most significant investment banks. Her movements were a blur of motion. Exit the German market, initiate short selling on the Nikkei, purchase gold, restructure Argentina's national debt. After precisely 1 hour of intense activity, she closed the laptop, returned it to its secure briefcase, and locked it. Ariadne vanished. Zanaya Vance, the unsophisticated country girl and purportedly illiterate wife, had re-emerged. She sat on the edge of the bed, the distant rumble of Jamal's sports car audible outside. He had returned, but he would not venture to this level of the house. He scarcely considered this room a part of the dwelling. The pervasive coldness of the attic seemed to seep into her very soul. In the executive office of the Sterling Group, situated within the Sterling Tower in the heart of downtown Atlanta, a crystal ashtray was violently hurled by Jamal Sterling against the opposing wall, shattering into countless pieces. Incompetent, a collective of utterly useless imbeciles, he bellowed at his department heads via video conference. I remunerate you millions of dollars annually, and you are incapable of resolving a rudimentary liquidity crisis. The German financial institutions are refusing to extend further credit. Why? The assembled directors lowered their heads, intimidated. No one dared to offer an explanation. The ambitious European biotechnology project had proven to be a catastrophic failure. It was hemorrhaging the Sterling Group's capital at an alarming rate. Shareholders had already begun to voice their concerns. Jamal abruptly terminated the video call, loosening his tie. He was undeniably in dire straits. At that precise moment, the office door opened with a soft click. Kiana Sorrell entered, carrying a steaming cup of coffee. She was not attired in a typical secretary's uniform, but rather a form-fitting, alluring dress. "Jamal," she murmured softly, moving around the desk and placing her hands on his shoulders, gently massaging them. Do not distress yourself. I am confident a resolution can be found. Her soothing presence and delicate perfume had a calming effect on Jamal. He closed his eyes, leaning back in his chair. What resolution? All the banks have turned their backs on me. Kana offered a subtle smile. While the banks may have withdrawn their support, the Sterling family has not. Jamal's eyes snapped open. What do you mean? I have just recalled, Kiana stated as if by mere chance, that grandfather Theron bequeathed some shares to Zanaya prior to his passing. It amounted to 20%. Jamal's brow furrowed. Yes, but they are held in trust. They are of no consequence unless she voluntarily agrees to their transfer. And she... But is she not your wife? Kiana interjected, her voice laden with implication. A wife has a fundamental obligation to share in her husband's burdens. No, Jamal countered, looking at her intently. Speak plainly. She places a great deal of trust in you, Kiana continued, her fingers lightly caressing his chest. Moreover, I understand she is unable to read or write. If it pertains to saving the company, to preserving the family's legacy, perhaps she would be persuaded to sign some documents to assist the business. After all, she is a Sterling, is she not? A chilling silence permeated the office. Jamal experienced a sudden, stark realization. He turned to Kiana. She is illiterate. A cruel, excited smile gradually spread across his handsome features. Indeed, an illiterate individual would possess no comprehension of stock transfer agreements. Kiana, observing his dawning understanding, added, This weekend, the Atlanta High Society is hosting the Hope and Legacy Charity Gala to raise funds for underprivileged children. Numerous members of the press will be in attendance. She gazed at him with palpable passion. If you bring Zanaya, you can publicly demonstrate your marital affection, and then casually you can have her sign some donation papers in front of everyone. No one will suspect a thing. As Jamal entered the residence, Zanaya instinctively took a step backward, bracing herself for the customary barrage of insults, or, more likely, his characteristic indifference. However, today, Jamal did not bypass her. He stopped. Zanaya! His voice remarkably lacked its usual iciness. It could almost be described as kind. Zanaya looked up, her eyes wide, betraying surprise mingled with a degree of apprehension. This was the first instance in 3 years that he had uttered her name without a hint of derision. I will be accompanying you to an event this weekend, he stated, attempting an air of casualness. Zanaya shook her head hastily, her hands clenching her apron. I cannot possibly attend. I am unversed in social graces. I would undoubtedly embarrass you. It matters not, Jamal insisted, his patience uncharacteristic, taking a step closer. It is a profoundly significant charitable occasion. Your presence alongside me is all that is required. He met her gaze. There will be a substantial donation made to aid underprivileged children. I wish for you to represent the Sterling family and affix your signature to the donation documents. Zanaya stared at him, searching for any semblance of sincerity in his eyes, but she detected only thinly veiled artifice. Select yourself a suitable ensemble, he added, turning away, yet maintaining his gentle tone. Do not be concerned, I will be present. He exited the kitchen. Zanaya remained standing motionless, her hands clasped tightly. A charitable event, signing documents. Jamal, who had consistently regarded her as an unwelcome burden, was willingly escorting her to a venue teeming with journalists. She was acutely aware of the Sterling Group's precarious financial standing. She understood his desperation. The bait had finally been taken. The St. Regis Atlanta, the venue for the Hope and Legacy Charity Gala, was indeed an epitome of extravagance. Esteemed members of the media and prominent Atlanta socialites were in attendance. Jamal Sterling, resplendent in an elegant tuxedo, emerged from a Rolls-Royce. He walked around the vehicle to open the door, and the individual who stepped out was not Kiana, as was typically the case, but Zanaya Vance. She was adorned in a simple, long beige dress, her hair elegantly swept back into a low chignon. The attire was immaculate, yet in comparison to the designer gowns and sparkling embellishments surrounding her, she appeared akin to a small sparrow adrift amidst a flock of ostentatious peacocks. All camera lenses immediately converged upon them. For the first time in his life, Jamal placed an arm around Zanaya's waist. Her body stiffened involuntarily. She flawlessly executed the role of a timid country girl clinging to her husband's arm. "Mr. Sterling, is this Mrs. Sterling? What a delightful surprise, Mr. Sterling. We have heard persistent rumors regarding your association with your executive assistant, Kana." Jamal offered a practiced, perfect smile. "Today my wife and I are here to support a worthy charitable endeavor." Zanaya, despite her unfamiliarity with such bustling environments, possesses an exceptionally compassionate heart. He uttered these words, yet the hand encircling her waist tightened like a vice, a silent admonishment for her to remain quiet. Following the obligatory pleasantries, Jamal guided Zanaya not towards the main ballroom, but to a secluded VIP chamber that had been prearranged. "You must be feeling fatigued," he remarked, his kindness still evident, though a flicker of impatience now discernible in his eyes. "Please rest here. I need to extend my greetings to some business partners. Someone will bring the necessary documents for your signature shortly." Zanaya inclined her head obediently, settling onto the edge of the sofa, her back erect and her hands resting demurely in her lap, much like a student awaiting instruction from a teacher. Jamal departed, seemingly satisfied. After a considerable interval, the door to the room opened. It was not Jamal who entered, but his personal legal counsel, Attorney Quentin Miles. Flanking him were two security personnel. Attorney Miles appeared distinctly uncomfortable. He placed a thick folder, bulging with documents, onto the table. "Mrs. Sterling, Mr. Jamal has indicated your agreement to sign these papers." Zanaya regarded the folder. She had no need to examine its contents. Merely by its considerable thickness and the quality of its leather binding, she understood that these were not donation forms. At that precise moment Jamal entered. He had evidently managed to extricate himself from the persistent journalists. "Sign it," he commanded bluntly. Zanaya looked at him, then at the folder, a bewildered expression on her face. "Jamal, you stated it was for a donation. Why are there so many documents?" Jamal's patience began to fray. "Why are you posing so many inquiries? This is the requisite procedure for authorizing the charitable funds." He flipped directly to the final page, a page densely filled with text in both English and Spanish. He gestured to a blank line at the bottom. "Inscribe your name, Zanaya Vance." "Here." Zanaya trembled visibly. She glanced at the heading at the top of the page. Although he attempted to obscure a portion of it with his finger, she could still discern the four crucial words: "Stock Transfer Agreement Contract." She commenced her act. Her eyes welled with tears. Her voice quivered. "Jamal, there are so many letters. I do not know how to decipher them. What if I were to sign in the incorrect location?" Attorney Miles began to sweat profusely. "Mr. Sterling, having an illiterate individual execute such a significant contract holds no legal validity." "Silence!" Jamal snapped, directing a furious glare at Attorney Miles. The lawyer immediately fell silent. Jamal turned his attention back to Zanaya. His anger barely contained, yet he maintained a semblance of composure, his voice adopting an eerily persuasive tone. "It's merely your designation. What dread grips you? Or perhaps you desire a template, a scholastic model for replication. The sheer ignominy of those pronouncements caused Zanaya to clench her fists. Tears welled in her eyes. Where? Where must I affix my mark? Here, he indicated the designated space. Indeed, inscribe Zanaya Vance right here, proceed, be compliant. His tone was akin to coaxing a young child. Zanaya grasped the opulent fountain pen, her hand quivering uncontrollably. She lowered her head, allowing her hair to obscure her frigid gaze. With deliberate slowness and a touch of awkwardness, she began to form each stroke, much like an individual attempting to replicate a name they barely comprehend. Zanaya Vank. Upon reaching the final character, the letter E in Vance, she hesitated. Jamal held his breath. She bit her lip, then completed the inscription. However, in the very last flourish of the letter, she artfully introduced a minuscule, almost undetectable embellishment, subtly disrupting the character's integrity and rendering it structurally flawed. It still bore the resemblance of Vance, yet legally it constituted an invalidated signature. She set down the pen, her breathing ragged, as if she had just completed a task of immense physical exertion. Jamal swiftly seized the folder, his eyes scanning the signature with haste. It resembled an ungainly scribble, characteristic of someone bereft of literacy. He failed to detect the subtle imperfection. A triumphant smirk bloomed on his countenance. Completed, he declared, forcefully snapping the folder shut. It is concluded. Remain precisely here. Do not stir. I shall manage the remainder. He and his legal counsel, Miles, departed with marked alacrity, as though Zanaya herself were a contagion. Zanaya found herself alone in the private chamber. Gradually, she raised her head. The fear and tears had vanished. She regarded the hand that had just executed the signature. A painful signature. Painful not to her, but to the sheer foolishness and malice of Jamal Sterling. The endgame was approaching. The return journey to the Sterling Buckhead estate was shrouded in absolute silence. Whereas on the outward trip, Jamal had feigned the role of an affectionate husband, he now made no pretense of concealing his elation and disdain. He was perpetually engaged on his mobile device, his voice resonating with victory, entirely disregarding Zanaya seated beside him. The instant they entered the drawing room, he did not even wait for her to remove her footwear. Loosening his tie, he slumped onto the sofa and immediately initiated a call. This time, he activated the speakerphone. Kiana's indulged voice chimed in instantly. Jamal, is it finalized, my dearest? Jamal emitted a chuckle of profound satisfaction. My love, it is done. Zanaya, in the process of removing her shoes, paused. She slowly turned. Seriously? Kiana shrieked. That simpleton from the countryside actually signed? Indeed. Jamal leaned back, propping his feet on the coffee table. The 20% of the company's equity is entirely within my grasp. I am transferring it to you forthwith. By tomorrow morning, the legal professional will finalize all documentation. You shall be a principal stakeholder in the Sterling conglomerate. He cast a glance at Zanaya, who stood frozen by the doorway, her expression challenging. Hi, the Sterling conglomerate is secure, Kiana. You are my most significant benefactor. Your apartment tonight, yes, we must commemorate this. Affirmative. Kiana giggled. I shall be anticipating it. I cherish you. The call concluded. The atmosphere within the drawing room grew frigid. Zanaya approached him, her hands tightly balled. She maintained her pretense of the guileless spouse. Jamal, her voice quivered. What are you proclaiming? What equity are you discussing? Transferring to Ms. Sorrel? She attempted to press him. No, was this not a charitable contribution designated for the children? Charity? Jamal recoiled. He laughed, a boisterous, joyless sound imbued with pure cruelty and utter scorn. He advanced towards Zanaya, his once handsome visage now appearing terrifying. Do you truly believe an unlettered simpleton like yourself possesses any worth to warrant charitable donations? Zanaya retreated a step. But you stated, he bellowed, tearing away the facade of affability from the gala. Silence for 3 years. I have endured you for 3 years, tolerating your ignorant rustic countenance, enduring the fact that all of Atlanta mocks me for espousing a passive, uneducated consort. He seized her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. Do you imagine your grandfather, the late Theon, bequeathed you 20% of the shares for your amusement, for you to revel in, for you to assume the mantle of Mrs. Sterling? He spat on the floor. No, that represents Sterling family assets. It belongs to me. Today I have merely reclaimed that which is rightfully mine. Zanaya's tears flowed freely. You betrayed me. Betrayed? He scoffed contemptuously. Negotiating with an illiterate individual is not termed betrayal. It is termed optimizing resources. He released her chin but patted her cheek, a gesture dripping with supreme humiliation. Your sole utility during these past 3 years has been these 20% of shares, now that the contract is ratified. He stepped back, retrieved a handkerchief, and meticulously wiped the fingers that had touched her, as if she was something abhorrent. You are now superfluous. The final words were delivered with deliberate clarity and slowness. Zanaya collapsed onto her knees. Jamal observed her kneeling form, his gaze devoid of any trace of empathy. He proceeded to a desk situated in the drawing room's corner, extracted a pre-prepared document portfolio, and flung it directly at her, the contents scattered, raining down around Zanaya. Divorce proceedings. His voice was glacial. I have already affixed my signature. Your turn is next. You are entitled to not a single farthing. You arrived with nothing, you depart with nothing. He stooped and retrieved a sheet. Ah, I neglected to mention, you are incapable of reading. He procured an ink pad for fingerprints and tossed it at her feet. Affix your digital impression here without delay. Zanaya did not retrieve the divorce documents. She merely lifted her head and met his gaze, tears coursing down her cheeks. Her eyes no longer conveyed fear, but a terrifying emptiness. Jamal perceived that look, igniting his fury further. What are you still gazing at? Do you presume I intend to harbor you here, an ignorant piece of refuse incapable of even producing offspring? Sign and vanish from my domicile this instant. Zanaya remained silent. Vanish! His patience evaporated entirely. He lunged, seized her arm, and forcefully dragged her towards the exit. He wrenched the main portal open and shoved her, causing her to tumble onto the frigid steps outside. By tomorrow morning, he declared, standing on the threshold, looking down at her, I do not wish to behold your visage within this residence ever again. He slammed the door shut with resounding finality. Zanaya lay prone on the cold granite floor. The nocturnal breeze from the coast whispered slowly. She sat up, placing a hand to her face to wipe away her tears. She regarded the firmly shut wooden portal. Jamal Sterling, the one who must disappear, is you. She rose, brushed the dust from her unpretentious attire, and walked away without a backward glance. She proceeded serenely through the grand gates of the Sterling estate. The imposing oak portal of the Sterling residence sealed shut with a resonant, definitive thud. Zena Vance collapsed, helpless, onto the cold granite steps. The crisp November night air in Atlanta carried a chill that penetrated her frail form through the inexpensive fabric of her dress. She had just been unceremoniously ejected from her home by Jamal Sterling, her legal spouse, as though she were disposable refuse. She remained there for a few moments, feeling the biting cold seep into her skin. A drizzle began to fall. Cold raindrops landed on her face, mingling with the tears of humiliation she deliberately allowed to stream. Zanaya slowly sat up. She did not retrieve the small bag of belongings he had discarded. The rain intensified, becoming a torrential downpour, washing away the cheap makeup from her face, revealing delicate features, pale from the cold. She staggered to her feet and made her way towards the main gate. Just then, two blinding beams of light illuminated her face. An ostentatious wine-red Maserati braked abruptly in front of the gate, nearly colliding with her. The car door opened. It was not Jamal. The uniformed chauffeur hurried out, holding an umbrella. Kiana Sorrell emerged. She was not clad in a secretary's attire, but in an exceedingly costly burgundy evening gown, a white mink fur coat draped over her shoulders. She exuded the air of the true mistress of the house and its festivities. She approached Zanaya slowly, the umbrella shielding her meticulously, preventing a single raindrop from touching her. She surveyed Zanaya, who was thoroughly drenched, her hair plastered to her face, appearing as wretched as an abandoned canine. "Oh," Kiana covered her mouth, her voice dripping with feigned sympathy. "Zanaya, how did this misfortune befall you? It's raining so heavily. Why are you out here?" Zanaya lifted her head, her eyes red-rimmed, and met Kiana's gaze. "Jamal had an urgent matter to attend to, so he requested I come and bid you farewell." Kiana smiled, a sweet expression, but her words were like daggers. "After all, for the past 3 years you've looked after Jamal for me. I ought to express my gratitude." She moved closer, lowering her voice so only the two of them could hear. "Do you know what Jamal said when he obtained your signature?" Zanaya clenched her fists. "He declared," Kiana whispered in her ear, "that he had finally rid himself of that foolish, burdensome dead weight." "Kiana!" Zanaya growled, her fury palpable. The smile on Kiana's lips vanished, replaced by an expression of haughty superiority and animosity. "And who do you believe you are? Did you truly imagine the title of Mrs. Sterling was rightfully yours?" Slap! A violent blow. Kiana unleashed all her strength. The impact was so forceful that Zanaya toppled into a puddle of murky water. "You provincial simpleton!" Kiana hissed, her exquisite features contorted with rage. "You usurped my rightful place for 3 years. During these 3 years, the individual destined for that mansion was me. The person who ought to have been cherished and doted upon by Jamal was me. This slap. You owed me this." She withdrew a silk handkerchief from her purse, meticulously wiped the hand that had just struck Zanaya as if it had made contact with something vile, and then tossed the handkerchief at her. "Look at yourself. How utterly pathetic. A useless, unlettered creature. You never belonged here." The chauffeur opened the car door for Kiana, and she elegantly entered. "Ah, indeed." She turned and offered one last sardonic smile. From this moment forward, the Sterling residence possesses a new matriarch, and that 20% of the company's equity, Jamal presented it to me as a wedding gift. The Maserati roared to life, sped past Zanaya, deliberately splashing through a puddle and drenching her further with muddy water. The formidable iron gates of the estate parted to admit the vehicle, then slowly closed, leaving Zanaya outside in the rain and utter humiliation. Zanaya remained motionless in the puddle of icy water. After a few minutes, she lowered her hands and rose to her feet. The torrential downpour seemed to have washed away all the timidity and resignation of the preceding 3 years. She ran a hand through her soaked hair, pushing it back. In the deepening darkness, her eyes no longer betrayed fear or confusion, but instead a terrifying coldness and an unnerving sharpness. She did not cast another glance at the Sterling gates. She turned and began to walk through the rain. After a few paces, she stopped beside an antiquated public telephone booth. She entered, lifted the receiver, but did not insert any coins. With deliberate intent, she dialed a lengthy, intricate sequence of numbers on the keypad. Following a few audible rings, the call was answered. A man's voice, impeccably polite and speaking flawless English, responded. Miss Vance. Zanaya gazed out at the Atlanta rain, her voice steady and cold. Assistant Chen, make preparations. Prepare what, madam? Activate the Ariadne protocol. Inform Deutsche Bank, JP Morgan, and Nomura. The time has come to draw in the net. She paused for a beat, then added, the game has commenced. In stark contrast to the chilling rain outside, within the Sterling Buckhead estate, the fireplace blazed with intense fervour, flames dancing in the crystal-clear cognac glasses. Jamal Sterling, having just completed his shower, was clad in a silken bathrobe, his feet propped atop the coffee table. He was in a state of supreme contentment. He had effectively divested himself of the troublesome impediment, secured the 20% of the company's shares, and was on the verge of salvaging his business empire. Kiana, also refreshed by a shower, wore a diaphanous black silk negligee. Barefoot, she approached and settled onto his lap. Diane descended the staircase, her countenance alight with exultation. She took a seat in the chair opposite. Finally, she declared, our family has been liberated from that burdensome presence. You conducted yourself admirably, Jamal. Jamal took a sip of his cognac, his hand firmly encircling Kiana's waist. Mother, it was a foregone conclusion. I informed you I had no intention of allowing an unlettered provincial girl to tarnish our family's reputation for an extended period. Diane regarded Kiana with evident satisfaction. Kiana, my dear, it must have been arduous for you to endure the ignominy of being the other woman throughout this entire duration. Kiana immediately leaned against Jamal's shoulder, her voice tinged with a delicate timidity and a hint of embarrassment. Auntie, it signifies naught. As long as I can be with Jamal, I am content. She looked from Jamal to Diane. Then she bit her lip, her expression a peculiar blend of hesitant anticipation and sheer happiness. Auntie Jamal, I possess further excellent tidings. I am uncertain if I should disclose them at this juncture. Jamal chuckled, presuming she sought a material gift. What is it, my treasure? I shall bestow upon you anything your heart desires. That diamond necklace from the other day, or perhaps a villa in Savannah. It is not that. Kiana gently patted his chest. I believe. She inhaled deeply and placed a hand on her abdomen. I believe I am carrying Jamal's child. What? The glass in Jamal's hand nearly slipped. He was utterly astonished. Diane sprang to her feet, rushing towards Kiana, her voice quivering with profound emotion. Kiana, are you being truthful? You are expectant? Kiana nodded, her eyes welling with tears. My cycle is 2 weeks overdue. I conducted a test this morning, and it yielded a positive result. I had intended to inform you over the weekend. Oh my heavens! Diane clasped her hands together. The Sterling lineage is to be graced with an heir. We shall have a successor. Jamal remained stunned for a few moments. Then an overwhelming euphoria swept over him. Pregnant, he was to become a father. It was a double blessing. He possessed wealth and a son to carry on his name. And yet that useless woman, Zena Vance, for 3 years, and she couldn't even grant him a child. He embraced Kiana tightly, lifted her, and spun her around. Kiana, you are my precious gem, my harbinger of good fortune. He set her down and kissed her forehead. Mother, did you hear? I am to have a son. Diane was so overcome with joy that she was weeping. I heard, that is truly wonderful, my dear daughter-in-law. Her mode of address had instantly transformed. Kana nestled into Jamal's embrace, concealing a victorious smile. Of course she was not pregnant. She had procured the pregnancy test from an online vendor, but she required an unshakable guarantee. The following morning, chaos reigned supreme within the Sterling Tower. The Sterling Group's stock had been suspended from trading due to a precipitous decline. Creditors formed queues outside the tower. An extraordinary general meeting had been scheduled for 2 days hence, representing their final recourse. He was frantically making calls, leveraging all his connections, but encountered only silence or courteous rejections. The Ariadne analysis had exposed the group's critical vulnerability. No entity dared to salvage a sinking vessel. Kiana was equally consumed by panic. Her prospective status as Mrs. Sterling was not even assured. The child she claimed to carry did not exist, and they might soon find themselves destitute, begging for alms. Jamal attempted to soothe her, although his own hands trembled. "Do not fret, my dear. We still retain the 20% of shares that Zanaya transferred. Tomorrow morning I shall exert pressure on the lawyer to expedite the transfer. Even if the shares have depreciated significantly, they still represent a substantial sum. We can utilize them for negotiation." Jamal nodded, yet he recognized this offered scant solace. At that precise moment, his executive assistant, Mr. Leon Bridges, burst in, his complexion ashen. "Mr. Sterling, there is an update." "What now?" Jamal demanded. "Another bank has withdrawn its funding." "No, Mr." Bridges shook his head, presenting him with a tablet. "It is an electronic mail, sir. An email that has been disseminated simultaneously to the inboxes of all board members and our international partners who abandoned us." "What email?" Jamal snatched the tablet. The message was composed in 3 languages: English, Spanish, and German. It was concise yet potent. "Open letter to the Sterling Group Board of Directors and Creditors. We are Ariadne Capital. We have been closely observing the Sterling Group's crisis, a situation stemming from suboptimal management and misguided investment strategies. Nevertheless, we maintain faith in the group's fundamental strengths and inherent potential. At the forthcoming extraordinary general meeting, a representative from our organization will be in attendance as a new strategic stakeholder. We shall present a comprehensive restructuring plan, including an immediate capital infusion to resolve the entirety of the debt crisis. Sincerely, Ariadne Capital." Jamal ground his teeth. "Ariadne, the identical designation as the report that precipitated my downfall. Who are they?" Kiana inquired, her voice trembling. He paced back and forth. "And now they present themselves as strategic shareholders. It is abundantly clear they intend to exploit this opportunity to seize control of the Sterling Group at a remarkably advantageous price." Kiana comprehended. "My goodness, how utterly ruthless, the sheer barbarity." Jamal emitted a chilling laugh. "That is the nature of commerce." He sat down. The initial wave of panic receded, replaced by a burgeoning fighting spirit. "They presume I am an easy target. They believe the Sterling Group is readily digestible." He looked at Kiana. "Ascertain the true identity of this Ariadne Capital. You will confront them." "Confront them?" Jamal scoffed. "I shall demonstrate to them precisely who presides over the Sterling Group. They desire control. Let them endeavor to achieve it." He still possessed a hidden advantage. He was convinced that the 20% of shares he had illicitly acquired from Zanaya, combined with his own holdings, would suffice to thwart any hostile takeover attempt. He remained blissfully unaware that Ariadne Capital was not a scavenger, but the predator, and he the unsuspecting prey. While Jamal frantically prepared for a confrontation concerning a potential acquisition elsewhere in Atlanta, the atmosphere was vastly different. The Mandarin Oriental Atlanta, the most opulent presidential suite, offering a breathtaking panorama of the Atlanta skyline at night. The city's vibrant neon lights illuminated the space, creating an enchanting tableau. Zenaya Vance stood before the expansive window. She was no longer attired in her provincial garments. She wore a black silk robe, her long dark tresses cascading freely like a waterfall. In her hand, she held a glass of red wine, a Chateau Margaux from the 1990s vintage. If Jamal or Diane were to witness her now, they would undoubtedly question their own perceptions. Her aura, regal, composed, and aloof, bore no resemblance to the unlettered country girl they believed they knew. The dimly lit attic seemed like a relic from a bygone era. Knock, knock. A gentle rap sounded at the door. Enter, Zenaya commanded. Her voice was clear yet imbued with a chilling coolness. Assistant Savannah Chen entered, a middle-aged man distinguished by his gold-rimmed spectacles, his demeanor exuding profound respect. He served as the administrator of Zenaya's substantial private investment fund, Ariadne Capital. President Vance, Assistant Chen bowed his head. He had grown accustomed to addressing her in this manner over the past 8 years. All preparations are finalized for 9 o'clock tomorrow morning at the Sterling Tower. Zenaya did not turn. She delicately swirled the ruby-hued liquid, observing it intently. And our esteemed guests, Assistant Chen? He consulted his organizer. Confirmed. Our entire international legal contingent from Sullivan and Cromwell arrived at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport 2 hours ago. They are currently resting at this hotel. He turned a page. And as per your explicit directive, we have extended personal invitations to the most prominent creditors. The senior representative from Deutsche Bank, hailing from Berlin, has confirmed his attendance. He read aloud. Director Schmidt, the very same individual who regrettably overlooked 17 calls from Jamal Sterling, will be present. The Nomura representative from Tokyo has confirmed. The executive vice president of JP Morgan from New York has confirmed. These are the very entities that divested the majority of the group's shares, acting upon our strategic instructions. And finally, the Paris Investment Fund has also dispatched a representative. They are all keenly anticipating meeting Ariadne in person, the individual responsible for their deliverance from what would have been a disastrous investment in the Sterling Group. Excellent, Zenaya finally spoke. She took a sip of wine, the faintly bitter essence spreading across her palate. Her gaze fixed on the Sterling Tower, brilliantly illuminated in the distance. She could vividly imagine Jamal, consumed by panic like a wounded animal, within its walls. 3 years. She recalled the day Grandfather Theon grasped her hand on his deathbed. Grant him an opportunity, he had implored. She had indeed granted him one. She remembered the 3 years spent living as a virtual servant. Diane's contemptuous glares, Jamal's chilling indifference. She recalled the humiliating charade at the charity gala, the deliberately flawed signature, and the stinging impact of Kiana's slap. That slap. She intended to repay that insult 100-fold. Jamal Sterling, she murmured to herself, her voice weaving into the Atlanta night breeze. For 3 years you owe me. Tomorrow I reclaim it all with considerable interest. President Vance. Assistant Chen interrupted her thoughts. The suit you requested for tomorrow is prepared, he stated, indicating a suit meticulously displayed on a rack. It was a custom-tailored pearl-white ensemble from Paris's most esteemed tailor, exuding elegance, power, and sheer exquisite craftsmanship. Zenaya nodded. Very well, you may retire. Ensure everyone rests adequately. Yes, President Vance. Assistant Chen departed quietly, closing the door. Within the opulent presidential suite, Zenaya raised her glass, aiming it towards the Sterling Tower. A toast to your profound foolishness. 9 o'clock in the morning, Sterling Tower. Never had the headquarters of the Sterling Group witnessed such pandemonium. Hundreds of journalists from both prominent and obscure financial media outlets, hailing from both domestic and international spheres, filled the main lobby, contained by a formidable security cordon. Will Mr. Sterling make an appearance? Will the conglomerate declare insolvency today? Who precisely is Ariadne Capital? Are they genuinely poised to assume control of the group? Camera flashes erupted incessantly, the cacophony and jostling utterly overwhelming. Inside the main auditorium on the 68th floor, the atmosphere was even more oppressive. The auditorium, with a seating capacity for 500 individuals, was completely filled. Shareholders ranging from major investment funds to modest individual investors were all present, their countenances etched with bewilderment, fury, and despair. Their shares had now dwindled to virtually no value. Ding. The bell signaling the commencement of the meeting chimed. A side door opened. Jamal Sterling entered. He attempted to project an image of composure by puffing out his chest, yet his pallid complexion and the dark circles beneath his eyes belied his true state. He ascended the stage, adjusted the microphone. Today, he cleared his throat, I am aware that you are all profoundly concerned. I admit that the Sterling Group is currently navigating temporary challenges. Temporary? A voice boomed from the audience. Mr. Preston Hayes, an elderly and respected figure, a long-standing rival of the Sterling family, surged to his feet in the front row. In a separate section, the international creditors, men clad in expensive suits representing Germany, Japan, and America, sat with faces as cold as stone, watching in silence, anticipating their prey's struggle. Mr. Hayes, I understand your dissatisfaction with me, but today is not the opportune moment for criticism. Our most significant issues are liquidity and our share structure. He drew a deep breath, electing to reveal his strategy. He still harbored the conviction that he held the reins of the situation. I wish to inform you that the issue concerning the 20% of locked shares has been resolved. I have acquired all of those shares, he declared, deliberately fabricating the conclusion of the process. A palpable calm settled over the auditorium. 20% represented a substantial portion. Furthermore, he continued, his voice imbued with confidence, as you are all aware from the email correspondence, today we welcome a new strategic investor, Ariadne Capital. They have pledged to inject capital and salvage the Sterling Group. He managed a strained smile. Whether their intention is acquisition or partnership, I, Jamal Sterling, as the largest shareholder, will safeguard everyone's interests. He still believed himself to be the largest shareholder. He still perceived Ariadne as an external adversary with whom he could negotiate. Jamal Sterling, you refer to this as temporary? Mr. Hayes gestured towards the immense screen displaying the stock's precipitous decline. You have annihilated the lifetime achievements of your grandfather. You have transformed our wealth into worthless paper. Return our money, Jamal Sterling. Resign. The auditorium descended into chaos. Kiana, visibly frightened, retreated behind Jamal. Silence! Jamal's voice, amplified by the microphone, thundered, Everyone, silence! He fixed his gaze upon Mr. Hayes. Mr. Ha... But before he could complete his sentence, a sharp crack echoed. The main auditorium door, a heavy, solid wood portal reserved for the most solemn proceedings, was violently flung open from the exterior. Two blinding beams of light from the hallway pierced the interior, causing everyone to squint. All sound ceased. Hundreds of eyes swiveled in unison towards the entrance. From the dazzling illumination, a figure emerged. The sole sound within the cavernous auditorium was the sharp, rhythmic click-clack of high heels on the marble floor. The individual stepped into the light. It was a woman. She wore a suit, not an evening gown, nor an ordinary business suit. A commanding pearl-white suit, impeccably tailored to accentuate her slender yet statuesque physique. Her long, dark hair was artfully swept into an elegant chignon. revealing a high forehead and a proud, swan-like neck. Her makeup was minimal, yet her burgundy lips and her frigid, razor-sharp gaze rendered her utterly captivating. Her aura radiated not of wealth, but of unassailable dominance, a presence so imposing that all the formidable men in the room suddenly felt diminished. Accompanying her were not security guards, but Assistant Chen, whom some of the older shareholders vaguely recognized. And behind Assistant Chen, a retinue of 10 individuals, men and women in dark suits, possessing blonde and brown hair, blue eyes, and fair complexions, the world's preeminent team of international legal experts. The auditorium fell into an absolute hush. Every breath was held. Who is she? Is this the representative of Ariadne Capital? The woman continued her measured progress down the central aisle, making her way towards the podium. As she passed the row of international investors, those powerful men from Berlin, Tokyo, and New York, the very same who had previously ignored Jamal Sterling, all rose simultaneously. They inclined their heads slightly in a gesture of profound respect. A silent murmur swept through the entire auditorium. At that instant, Jamal felt as though he had been struck by a bolt of lightning. He stood frozen, his mind unable to process the revelation. This woman with her queenly bearing and that penetrating gaze. How was this possible? It was Zanaya Vance, the country girl, the demure wife, the utterly useless, unlettered individual he had banished from his home merely days ago. No, 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 he muttered, taking a step backward. Kiana was even more aghast. Jamal, Jamal! She clutched his arm, trembling. Why? Why is she here? What is she wearing? She... The unnerving silence was shattered by Jamal Sterling's furious roar. His denial morphed into unbridled rage. He refused to accept the reality. This had to be a jest. She had returned to plead. She had the audacity to disrupt his meeting. Security! He bellowed into the microphone, his voice shrill and echoing. He pointed directly at Zanaya Vance, his face contorted with pure fury. Security, are you all blind? Who permitted this country bumpkin to enter? He raged at the entire assembly. This is a shareholders' meeting. It is not a venue for an illiterate to create a scene. Escort her out. Drag her out of here this instant. His roar reverberated. The Sterling Group security personnel hesitated, then moved forward only to be immediately intercepted by the international legal team. Zanaya Vance did not even deign to glance at Jamal. She finally reached the base of the podium, lifted her head, and looked directly at Jamal Sterling. Jamal's frenzied rage still echoed in the auditorium. Security, remove her! But no guard dared to advance. They were utterly intimidated by the woman's formidable presence. The entire auditorium lapsed into an unnerving silence. Hundreds of gazes were fixed upon her in anticipation. Zanaya Vance offered a smile, a cold, distant smile. She calmly reached for the second microphone on the podium, the very same one Jamal had just used to shout. She tapped it lightly, tap, tap. The amplified sound resonated, cutting through the clamor. Jamal seemed to awaken from a nightmare. He stared at her, his eyes bloodshot. Zanaya Vance, what are you doing here? Are you insane? He still couldn't fathom it. He still perceived her as the unlettered country girl. And that white suit you're wearing? Where did you pilfer those garments? Do you imagine that merely by adorning yourself in designer clothing, you're entitled to come here and cause a disturbance? Kiana stammered as well. Zanaya, please leave. This is not a place for you. Do not further enrage Jamal. Zanaya finally turned her attention to them. Her gaze held no trace of animosity, only profound pity. In her eyes, his outbursts were merely the final pathetic gasps of a loser. She ignored him. She disregarded the chaos. She paid no heed to the hundreds of eyes observing her. With composure, she ascended the steps to the podium where Jamal and Kiana stood. She paused beside the lectern. She did not look at Jamal, who was paralyzed, his face ashen, nor at Kiana, who trembled, clutching his arm, her once lovely features now as white as paper. Jamal Sterling, her voice was clear, sharp, and as cold as ice, resonating through the auditorium sound system, remains as ignorant and as childish as ever. The auditorium was stunned. Dearhan, seated in a lower row, leaped up. "What did you say? You dare to call my son ignorant?" Director Schmidt, the German with the perpetually impassive countenance who had ignored Jamal's 17 calls, sprang to his feet, overturning the chair behind him. He stared at her, his eyes wide, his voice trembling with emotion. You are Ariadna." Beside him, the executive vice president of J.P. Morgan, that formidable American, also rose abruptly. He looked directly at Director Schmidt of Deutsche Bank, who was watching her, holding his breath. "I am Ariadna." 2 words, merely 2 words, yet they struck the auditorium like an atomic bomb. Jamal and Kiana were utterly dumbfounded. "Ariadna? What Ariadna?" They failed to grasp that they were not part of the global financial elite. They were unaware of the weight carried by that name, but others were acutely aware. My goodness, Ariadna, the enigmatic analyst who single-handedly orchestrated the collapse of the National Pension Fund with one analysis, the Sterling Group analysis. She authored it. Jamal remained bewildered. He could not comprehend what on earth was transpiration. "What are you people doing?" He turned to Director Schmidt. Mr. Schmidt, do you know this country girl? Are you all delusional? She cannot read." His shouts now lacked any semblance of authority. They were simply pathetic. Zanaya required no further utterance. The profound reverence of the international financial magnates served as the most eloquent response. She took the microphone, her sharp gaze sweeping across the entire auditorium, and commenced her address. "To begin," she stated, "I wish to express my gratitude to Mr. Jamal Sterling, who, in his capacity as CEO, has so effectively demonstrated to all of us the very essence of poor management, investment, hubris, and an utter lack of responsibility in crisis management. It is he who has guided the Sterling Group, his grandfather's legacy, to this ignominious predicament." Jamal swayed, stumbling backward, leaning against the lectern. He muttered like a madman, "No, it cannot be. 5 languages. She cannot read. Kiana beside him was completely undone. She could only gaze at Jamal, then at Zanaya. Unadulterated terror was evident in her eyes. She understood that she had gravely offended someone she could ill afford to antagonize. The auditorium was plunged into absolute silence. Hundreds of individuals, from shareholders to reporters, listened with bated breath. Zanaya's speech was unlike anything they had ever heard. It was incisive, precise, and undeniably powerful. Without consulting any notes, she began in flawless Spanish. Her voice, clear yet cold, resonated throughout the auditorium. She immediately addressed the American investors, her voice transitioning to perfect, fluent English. "To our American partners at J.P. Morgan, I fully comprehend your concerns regarding the liquidity deficit engendered by this calamitous European venture. Let me be unequivocally clear," Zanaya continued. "That investment is terminated with immediate effect. My team will present a comprehensive restructuring plan this very afternoon, and a personal capital injection from Ariadna Capital will unequivocally guarantee 100% of your capital." She then turned her attention to Director Schmidt, who watched her with solemnity. Her voice shifted to fluent German. "To the German investors, Mr. Schmidt, I appreciate your apprehension, but the biotechnology project was an egregious error. We shall divest ourselves of the superfluous biotech sector and recommit our focus to Sterling's core competencies, next generation semiconductor materials. I guarantee this strategic redirection will revolutionize our market standing. Director Schmidt exhaled a sigh of relief and nodded decisively. Her gaze then shifted to the Nomura representative from Japan. She offered a slight bow of courtesy and spoke in Japanese. To our esteemed partners at Nomura in Japan, your outstanding orders will be reinstated, contingent upon a 5-year exclusivity contract. The guarantee I offer is that of Ariadne's quality, not Jamal Sterling's. The Japanese representative quickly bowed in acknowledgement. Finally, she addressed the Paris Investment Fund, her voice once again transformed into melodious yet firm French. To our esteemed associates in Paris, the luxury market Sterling attempted to penetrate represents a monumental strategic miscalculation. We shall liquidate that division forthwith. The fund injection from my end will effectively cover the financial shortfall. The funds will be dispersed tomorrow. 5 languages, Spanish, English, German, Japanese, French, all articulated with perfect fluency, precision, and an unshakable confidence by the vocal cords of a woman. The very woman who had been branded illiterate for 3 protracted years. Jamal was petrified. He understood not a single syllable of German, Japanese, or French. However, he grasped Spanish and English perfectly. He heard her speak of terminating projects and of personal capital infusions. He observed Director Schmidt, the VP of JP Morgan, all nodding in agreement, their faces radiating confidence. His most profound nightmare was materializing. Not only had he been deceived, but he had been duped by a genius for 3 years. He had treated a genius as if she were less than an animal. "No," he muttered. 5 languages, impossible, this is a delusion. Kiana, standing beside him, was utterly shattered. She gazed at Jamal, then at Zanaya. Pure terror was etched across her features. She knew she had provoked the ire of someone she could not afford to offend. Zanaya concluded her discourse with the international investors, turned back and looked directly at Jamal. She spoke once more in Spanish, ensuring everyone in the auditorium could comprehend. "And now, Mr. Sterling," she said, a cold smile gracing her lips, "let us discuss that 20% of shares." Jamal and Kiana remained frozen. Jamal was muttering incessantly, like a malfunctioning automaton. 5 languages, impossible, she cannot read, Kiana's teeth chattered from sheer terror. Jamal, what do we do now? What do we do?" Zanaya regarded Jamal, her gaze devoid of any discernible emotion. "Mr. Sterling, you just announced to this auditorium that you obtained my 20% of shares and that you intended to transfer them to Ms. Sorrell." Jamal recoiled. The shares? It was true, he still possessed the 20% of shares. He had her signature. A faint glimmer of hope ignited. He clung to it desperately. "Yes, that is correct," he shouted, attempting to regain his composure. "So what if you command 5 languages? So what if you are feigning? You affixed your signature to the share transfer documents. You signed them right here." He gestured towards Attorney Miles, who stood pale as ash in a corner. "Attorney Miles, bring the contract. Bring it here." Attorney Miles trembled, unable to move. "There is no need for any bother," Zanaya stated coldly. She motioned to Assistant Chen. Assistant Chen nodded and connected a flash drive to the auditorium's projection system. The enormous screen behind Jamal, which had recently displayed the stock's downward trend, abruptly turned black before illuminating. It was not a document, it was a video. The setting was the VIP lounge of the St. Regis on the night of the charity gala. Jamal recognized it instantly. It was the very room he had used to deceive Zanaya. "What is this?" he stammered, panicking. "Turn that off. Who authorized this to be shown? Turn it off." But it was far too late. The video, captured by a hidden camera embedded in Zanaya's dress, began to play. The audio was perfectly clear. The video depicted Jamal entering. It showed Zanaya feigning fear. "Those are so many letters. I don't know how to read them." It showed Jamal yelling at Attorney Miles, "Shut up!" And it showed him cajoling her, "Come on, be a good girl." The entire auditorium held its collective breath. My God, he deceived his own wife. He tricked an illiterate into signing over property. He is worse than a beast. Diahan shrieked from downstairs. "Fake! This video is fabricated. My son is not like that." But no one believed her. Jamal stumbled backward, striking the lectern. No, this is a setup. It's fake. Zanaya raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Sterling, we have not yet reached the most compelling part." She gestured for Assistant Chen to advance the video. The screen zoomed in on the document folder, and as it did, Zanaya's icy voice spoke in perfect synchrony with the imagery. "Here is the signature I executed." The screen displayed an extreme close-up of the three distinct words, Zanaya Vance. Jamal scrutinized it intently. He perceived nothing out of the ordinary. It was the same unremarkable signature. "What are you trying to prove? The signature is there. You signed it!" he shouted. Zanaya smiled. "Mr. Sterling, you preside as the CEO of a major corporation, yet you lack even fundamental legal knowledge." She turned to her legal team. A blonde woman representing the Sullivan and Cromwell firm stepped forward, retrieved a microphone, and spoke in alarmingly fluent Spanish. "Good morning, everyone. I am Aisha Nolisa, legal representative for Mrs. Zena Vance." She indicated the screen. According to the Civil Code and Stock Corporation Law, a signature must accurately and completely represent the name of the signatory. If a signature is deliberately altered or signed under duress, it shall be deemed null and void. She made a subtle gesture. The screen zoomed in even closer on the final stroke of the word Vance. "Please observe closely," Aisha Noliza instructed. "The concluding E in Vance, Mrs. Zanaya Vance. That letter. In calligraphic terms, this constitutes an improper signature. It is not her name." She smiled. When combined with the video evidence, which clearly illustrates Mr. Jamal Sterling's fraudulent and intentional conduct towards an individual he believed to be illiterate. She paused, then declared with firm conviction, "This contract, pertaining to the transfer of the 20% of shares, is, from its inception, null and void." Boom. Jamal felt as though he had been struck on the head with a sledgehammer. Void, a forged signature. She had duped him at the very moment of signing. He stared at Zanaya. She remained composed, her demeanor unchanged. That meticulous plan, that unwavering patience, that sheer cruelty. He trembled. He was confronting a veritable monster. Void, and then what?" he repeated. "She is still my wife. She still possesses nothing." He desperately tried to cling to the last vestige of logic. Zanaya looked at him with a mixture of pity and disdain. "Did you truly believe I possessed merely that 20% of shares, Jamal?" Zanaya's question was akin to a bucket of icy water dousing Jamal Sterling's face. What do you mean?" he stammered. "That 20% was all Grandfather Theron bequeathed to her. I knew it. The family lawyer had confirmed it." Zanaya offered no reply. She turned to Assistant Chen. Assistant Chen stepped forward, carrying another folder bound in black leather. He opened it and produced a sheaf of meticulously sealed documents. "Gentlemen, members of the Board of Directors," Assistant Chen announced, his voice clear and resonant. 3 years ago, the late Mr. Theron Sterling, prior to his passing, executed 2 wills and established 2 distinct trusts. Jamal was utterly astounded. 2 trusts? Preposterous! There was only one. Diahan shrieked from downstairs as well. It's true. That old man only created one trust. I witnessed the lawyer announce it with my own eyes. Assistant Chen ignored them. The first trust, he continued, encompasses the 20% of Sterling Group shares registered in the name of Mrs. Zena Vance. This is the public trust that everyone is aware of. He held up the second sheaf of documents. The seal bore the insignia of a Swiss bank, not a national one. And this, he declared, is the second trust, a confidential trust established in Zurich, Switzerland. This trust holds 30% of Mr. Theron Sterling's personal shares in the group. The auditorium erupted in astonishment. 30%? My God, how did we not know this? The old man concealed it so expertly. Jamal felt his legs weaken. 30% plus 20% equaled 51%. No, it cannot be. Why? He screamed. Why would grandfather do this? Why did he hide it? Because, Zanaya finally spoke, her voice like shards of ice cutting through his desperate outcry. This 30% trust had a singular activation condition. She looked directly into his eyes, each word a dagger plunging into his heart. The arrangement was set to become fully operational, transferring complete ownership to me, Zanaya, on the very day you, Jamal Sterling, my grandson, would betray me. A profound silence descended upon the assembly hall. Betrayal. Jamal was utterly speechless. Zanaya motioned to her legal counsel, Nyolas. The blonde attorney returned to the speaker's stand. We shall now present the evidence of this treachery. The colossal screen flickered to life once more, displaying not a video, but a sequence of photographic images. Pictures of Jamal and Kiana embracing and sharing kisses at a restaurant. Snapshots of them holding hands within the opulent lobby of their luxury apartment building. Images of him presenting her with a diamond necklace. And finally, the recorded footage of him manipulating her into signing crucial documents, followed by a video of him forcibly ejecting her from the residence on a night of heavy rain. According to the stipulations of the confidential trust, Attorney Noles stated, the acts of public infidelity, fraud to acquire assets, and the violent eviction of the spouse from their dwelling constitute severe violations of the protective covenant. This evidence was transmitted to the Swiss financial institution on the very evening Mrs. Zanaya Vance was displaced from the Sterling estate. Assistant Chen ascended the platform, unfurling a document bearing a crimson seal from a Swiss bank. And here is the corroboration. Received at precisely 1 a.m, the Swiss bank has officially released the trust. Zanaya advanced a step. She met Jamal's gaze. You attempted to deceive me to secure an insignificant 20% of the shares. However, that very act of deception triggered the activation of the true 30% of the shares. She then addressed the assembled shareholders. Today, I, Zanaya, am officially vested with ownership of the initial 20% of shares from the first trust, in addition to the 30% from the subsequent trust. She held up 5 fingers. I currently command 51% of the Sterling Group's shares, she declared, her voice echoing through the space. I am the majority shareholder. A resounding thud echoed as Jamal collapsed to his knees. He could no longer bear the weight of it all. He slumped heavily into the executive chair positioned behind him. 51%. 51%. Not only had he forfeited the 20%, but he had lost everything. He had, with his own hands, delivered the Sterling Group into the possession of the very woman he most abhorred. No, no, grandfather. Grandfather, how could you inflict this upon me? He cried out, his voice akin to that of a wounded beast. Beside him, Kiana's eyes widened dramatically before rolling back. She pitched backward, losing consciousness. In the row below, Diane also succumbed to the shock. Clutching her chest, she swayed and then collapsed on the spot, causing a minor disturbance, though no one paid it any heed. All eyes were fixed upon Zanaya Vance, the newly crowned sovereign of the Sterling Group. The ultimate blow, 51%, had utterly shattered Jamal Sterling. He was slumped in the chief executive's chair, his gaze vacant, muttering incessantly. 51%. Betrayal, grandfather. Betrayal. The confusion in the audience began to dissipate. Dahan, who had genuinely succumbed to the shock, was being attended to by emergency medical personnel. Kiana, having fallen backward, remained motionless, but on the platform, Zanaya did not even cast a glance in their direction. Their collapse was of no concern to her. She looked at Jamal, a man whose grip on reality had completely evaporated, and then turned away with a chilling indifference. She retrieved the microphone, her voice measured yet commanding, effectively silencing all extraneous noise. Security, escort Mrs. Sterling and Mrs. Sorrell to the hospital. Ensure they do not disrupt the proceedings. Her tone was devoid of emotion, as though she were merely issuing instructions for the disposal of 2 damaged items. Gentlemen, shareholders, she then addressed the stunned gathering. We have expended far too much time on this inconsequential family drama. Let us now return to matters of substance. Jamal lifted his head. Business? No. The Sterling Group belongs to me. You cannot. Be silent. Mr. Hayes, the shareholder whom she had just publicly chastised, rose to his feet and pointed an accusatory finger at him. You no longer possess that right. The Sterling Group is the property of the shareholders, not of a charlatan like yourself. It is indeed true. You nearly plunged us into ruin. Zanaya raised her hand. The auditorium instantly fell silent. All gazes converged upon her, their new rescuer, their new empress. She gestured to Attorney Nolas. The blonde lawyer stepped forward to the podium. I can confirm that the law firm of Sullivan and Cromwell has thoroughly verified and authenticated the documentation received from the Swiss bank. Mrs. Zanaya Vance is the legal and undisputed proprietor of 51% of the voting shares of the Sterling Group. Her authority is absolute and irrefutable. Zanaya inclined her head. She looked at Jamal, who was being crushed by the stark reality of his situation. Jamal Sterling, did you grasp that clearly? She inquired. Now it is my turn. She inhaled deeply, her voice resonating through the microphone. I, Zanaya Vance, in my capacity as the newly appointed chairperson of the board of directors and the majority shareholder of the Sterling Group. She paused, her gaze fixed directly on Jamal. I formally propose a vote, she stated, each word delivered with absolute clarity, for the immediate removal of Jamal Sterling from his position as Chief Executive Officer, CEO. She afforded him no opportunity to respond. Grounds for removal: incompetent management, severely misguided investment strategies, fraudulent conduct towards shareholders, and the utilization of illicit methods to misappropriate corporate assets. These transgressions have brought the Sterling Group to the precipice of insolvency. No. Jamal, like a cornered animal, lunged forward, attempting to advance towards her. You cannot perpetrate this act, you sorceress. The Sterling Group is the patrimony of the Sterling family. You are merely a discarded spouse. You hold no claim. However, before he could reach her, the company's security personnel, the very individuals who had been drawing a salary from him mere hours before, swiftly intervened. They did not impede Zanaya. They restrained him. You. Jamal stood in utter astonishment. The shareholders in the audience began to stir. They had perceived a glimmer of hope. Their sole hope resided in this woman, Ariadna. I concur. Mr. Hayes was the first to raise his hand. The Sterling Group requires a capable leader, not a dissolute playboy who squanders family fortunes. I cast my vote for the dismissal of Jamal Sterling. I concur as well. Removal. We have endured him for far too long. Even those shareholders who had been Jamal's staunch allies, now facing the prospect of losing everything themselves, eagerly raised their hands. They could not countenance their fortunes being decimated alongside his. We also agree with the removal. Please, attorney, proceed with the vote tabulation, Zanaya requested calmly. Attorney Knowles promptly conducted the calculations. Madame Chair, excluding your 51% of shares, 98% of the shares present have voted in favour of the removal of Mr. Jamal Sterling from all his capacities within the Sterling Group. Very well. Zanaya observed Jamal, who was being held back by the guards. She picked up the microphone and delivered the final verdict. Jamal Sterling, you are terminated. Those two words, you are terminated, shattered the remnants of his composure. His silence broke. He no longer roared in defiance, but in sheer terror. No, no! He abruptly altered his mode of address towards her. He thrashed, attempting to break free from the guard's grasp, not to assault her, but to implore her. Zanaya, you cannot do this to me. I am your husband, Zanaya. But Zanaya Vance had already turned her back on him, his despair metamorphosed into sheer lunacy. Sorceress viper, I shall end you. I shall end you. He lunged forward wildly, but the guards subdued him. Escort him from this location, Zanaya commanded without turning around. Yes, Madame Chair. Two burly guards seized Jamal and dragged him away. He, like a tormented creature, struggled and shrieked ferociously. He was hauled down the central aisle, passing countless eyes that regarded him with disdain and grim satisfaction. As he was being dragged toward the exit, he made one final desperate struggle, twisting his head to gaze at her. The woman clad in the white suit, standing majestically on the platform. Now his shouts were no longer insults. He cried out her name, a desolate plea, laden with regret and utter hopelessness. Zanaya, Zanaya Vance, I was mistaken. Forgive me, I was the one in error, Zanaya. The heavy oak door slammed shut with a resounding boom, abruptly silencing his cries. The auditorium fell into a hushed silence. Zanaya Vance, standing on the platform, closed her eyes for a fleeting moment. She took a deep, fortifying breath. 3 years had concluded. She opened her eyes, her gaze once again sharp and focused. Assistant Chen, clear this disruption. Esteemed shareholders. She addressed the assembly. The Sterling Group restructuring meeting officially commences now. As Jamal was being forcibly removed, the disarray within the audience swiftly resolved itself. Diane, who had truly fainted from the sheer shock, was being attended to by paramedics. Only Kiana Sorrell remained. She had not fainted. She was merely rendered immobile by the overwhelming shock. However, upon hearing of Jamal's removal, her primal instinct for self-preservation ignited. She realized Jamal's fate was sealed. The Sterling family dynasty was shattered. She found herself with no recourse. She had to escape. While all attention remained fixated on Zanaya, who was initiating her restructuring discourse, Kiana quietly stood, removed her high heels, shed her tailored jacket, and attempted to melt into the throng of agitated employees by a side exit. She knew precisely where she needed to go, the subterranean parking garage. Her Maserati was still there, as were the diamond jewels Jamal had gifted her and the accompanying credit cards. She had to flee Atlanta, flee the country. She sprinted towards the emergency elevator, her finger repeatedly pressing the button for the -2 level. Her heart hammered against her ribs with frantic urgency. Faster, faster. The elevator doors slid open. The underground garage was eerily deserted. She ran with the fervor of a desperate soul towards her crimson sports car, her hands trembling as she fumbled for her car keys within her handbag. "Here they are," she exclaimed, pressing the unlock button. Just as she reached to open the car door and enter, a blinding flash of light erupted. Whoosh! Two brilliant headlights from an approaching vehicle illuminated her face, rendering her momentarily sightless. A black Bentley Molson was silently positioned there, effectively blocking her egress. The Bentley door swung open. Zanaya Vance emerged. If the white attire she wore in the auditorium symbolized power, the black ensemble she had now donned represented an executioner's decree. She had changed her attire immediately, following the conclusion of the initial segment of the meeting. Ms. Sorrel. Zanaya's voice reverberated through the cavernous garage. Where are you headed in such haste? Kiana slammed the car door shut and reversed, her back colliding with the Maserati. Excuse me, President Vance, she stammered, quickly altering her address. I was not feeling well. I intended to return home to rest. Home? Zanaya advanced slowly, the rhythmic clicking of her heels amplifying with each measured step. Do you genuinely believe that after today you still possess a home to which you can return? Kana could no longer maintain her pretense. She abruptly shifted her strategy, dropping to her knees on the cold concrete floor and crawling towards Zanaya, tears streaming down her face. Zanaya, I was wrong. I know I was wrong. She clutched Zanaya's legs. I was foolish. I was blinded by the allure of wealth. It was all Jamal's fault. He coerced me. He threatened to dismiss me if I did not assist him. She wept uncontrollably. Forgive me, please. We are both women. Forgive me. Zanaya regarded the woman clinging to her legs with utter disdain. She delivered a forceful kick, dislodging her. Miss Sorrel, your dramatic performance is even less convincing than my own. Perceiving that her pleas were proving futile, Kiana resorted to her final gambit. She abruptly stood upright, her hand resting protectively on her abdomen. You cannot harm me, she declared defiantly. I am pregnant. I am carrying Jamal Sterling's son, the heir to the Sterling family legacy. The unborn child is innocent. If you inflict harm upon me, you are effectively extinguishing a life. She harbored the belief that Zanaya, as a fellow woman, would hesitate to endanger an infant. Upon hearing this pronouncement, Zanaya exhibited no surprise. Instead, a faint smile touched her lips, a smile that sent a palpable shiver down Kiana's spine. Pregnant? Zanaya inquired. You claim you are carrying Jamal Sterling's child? Yes, he is the father of the baby. Do you not believe me? I believe you are carrying a child, Zanaya replied. However, I do not believe it is Jamal Sterling's offspring. Zanaya gestured subtly. Assistant Chen emerged from the car and presented Kiana with a folder. Open it and peruse its contents, Zanaya commanded. Kiana, her hands trembling uncontrollably, opened the folder. It contained a medical report from a private hospital in Atlanta. Patient Jamal Sterling. Date 6 months prior. She read through to the conclusive findings. Sperm analysis. Result azoospermia. Diagnosis infertility. The report slipped from Kiana's grasp, falling to the floor with a soft thud. She staggered backward, her denial palpable. No, it cannot be infertility. No, he said. The doctor assured him he was fine. Zanaya let out a contemptuous laugh. Indeed, because the authentic report was intercepted by me 6 months ago. The report he received was a fabrication I orchestrated. You. Kiana gazed at Zanaya, her eyes wide with horror. Why did you orchestrate such a deception? To await this very moment, Zanaya revealed, to witness precisely how you and his mother would enact the charade of the heir. She paused, her expression unreadable. Now, Miss Sorrel, whose child resides within your womb? Would you care for me to investigate that matter on your behalf? Kiana collapsed onto the ground, utterly defeated. She knew with absolute certainty that Jamal was indeed infertile. The child she carried belonged to another man with whom she had been intimate. But Zanaya continued, "Your romantic liaisons do not concern me in the slightest. What does pique my interest is this." Assistant Chen presented a second, considerably thicker folder. "For 3 years." Zanaya stated, "In your capacity as the executive assistant to the CEO, you exploited your position to receive illicit bribes and commissions from no fewer than 12 distinct vendors. You established a clandestine account in the Cayman Islands to facilitate the laundering of these illicit funds." Zanaya examined her fingernails. "Total value, $8.3 million. Miss Sorrell, this sum is more than sufficient to secure you a lengthy prison sentence of 10 to 15 years. Kana was completely immobilized, her mind a whirlwind of disbelief. "How? How do you know? It's a secret account." "I am Ariadna," Zanaya responded simply. "No account remains secret from me." "What? What do you intend to do?" Kiana whispered, her voice tinged with profound despair. Zanaya offered no direct reply. She merely inclined her head, gesturing behind Kiana. The faint wail of police sirens could be heard in the distance, gradually growing louder. 2 police cruisers entered the garage and came to a halt beside them. 4 uniformed officers disembarked. "Kiana Sorrell," a senior officer announced. Kiana turned, her face drained of all color. "We have received a formal complaint accompanied by irrefutable evidence. You are hereby placed under arrest on suspicion of embezzlement and money laundering. You will accompany us." "No, no!" Kiana shook her head frantically. "This is a fabrication. Zena Vance, you are defaming me." She attempted to flee, but 2 officers quickly subdued her and promptly fastened handcuffs around her wrists. "Vicious sorceress!" Kiana shrieked at Zanaya. "You will find no peace. Jamal will not forgive you." "Jamal?" Zanaya approached and whispered into her ear. "He can scarcely extricate himself." "Oh, and I almost forgot to inform you." She glanced at Kiana and smiled. "That slap you delivered to me on that rainy night, I shall ensure you vividly recall it every single day for the next 10 years of your incarceration." Kiana stood stunned and then erupted into a paroxysm of mad screams as they escorted her toward the police vehicle. Zanaya watched the police car depart, its sirens wailing. She returned to her Bentley. Assistant Chen back to the company. "We have a considerable amount of work yet to accomplish." The news of the Sterling Group's general meeting ignited a firestorm across all media outlets, not solely within Atlanta, but on a global scale. Ariadna revealed, the mistreated wife emerges as a financial prodigy. Illiterate spouse seizes control of multi-million-dollar conglomerate, following a speech delivered in 5 languages. CEO Jay Sterling apprehended on suspicion of fraud. Assistant arrested for embezzlement. The Sterling Group's stock remained suspended. Creditors, investors, and all employees held their breath. They had witnessed a spectacular act of retribution, but now they required a leader, not a performer. They needed to ascertain whether the Sterling Group would endure or perish. Zanaya afforded them no time for doubt. That very afternoon, while Jamal and Kiana were still undergoing processing at the police station, Zanaya immediately commenced her operational duties. First directive, debt resolution. She convened an emergency summit with the international creditors. Director Schmidt of Deutsche Bank, the Vice President of JP Morgan, and representatives from Japan and France were present in the conference room. The atmosphere remained palpably tense. "Ms. Ariadna, or should I address you as President Vance?" Director Schmidt began. "We are indeed highly impressed, but mere impression does not suffice for debt repayment. The Sterling Group still owes us $50 million due tomorrow." The other investors nodded in agreement. They held her in high regard, but they were, first and foremost, businessmen. Zanaya maintained her composure. I understand. Assistant Chen. Assistant Chen connected his laptop to the projector. Gentlemen, precisely 1 hour ago, Ariadne Capital, acting on behalf of the Sterling Group, liquidated the entire $50 million debt owed to Deutsche Bank. The obligation has been settled. What? Director Schmidt appeared utterly stunned. He promptly initiated a call to Berlin. Seconds later, he gazed at Zanaya with profound disbelief. The funds have been credited to the account. You utilized your personal capital. I will not permit the Sterling Group to face bankruptcy over an inconsequential debt, Zanaya stated. I declared my intention to inject capital. The immediate debt crisis has been averted. Second directive, renegotiation. Zanaya declared the debt resolved. Let us now address the future. She rose and began to pace around the table. She required no documents. She addressed J.P. Morgan in English. The European project is hereby terminated. All toxic assets will be liquidated within 48 hours. My team has already secured a buyer. We will recoup 30% of the capital rather than suffer a complete loss. She addressed Director Schmidt in German. I will not revoke the contract. On the contrary, I will double the investment, though not in biotechnology. Our focus will be on the Sterling Group's core business, next-generation semiconductor materials. Here is my projection model. She addressed Nomura in Japanese. Your orders will be reinstated, contingent upon a 5-year exclusivity agreement. I guarantee the quality of Ariadne, not the quality of Jamal Sterling. 1 week later, following a week of intense effort, Zanaya practically took up residence in the CEO's office. She orchestrated a ruthless purge. Jamal Sterling's entire cohort, from the aging, inept chief financial officer to the sycophantic head of human resources, along with a host of superfluous middle managers, were all dismissed in a single day. She replaced them with the elite cadre from Ariadne Capital. A breath of fresh, efficient, relentless, and absolutely loyal air was infused into the compromised Sterling Group machinery. She terminated all ostentatious and vanity projects that Jamal had initiated for self-aggrandizement, including the fashion division, which was divested at a bargain price to recoup capital. The following Monday, the Sterling Group shares resumed trading on the Atlanta Stock Exchange. 9:30 in the morning, market opening. There were no panic sales. Instead, a massive buy order materialized, followed by another. J.P. Morgan, Deutsche Bank, Nomura, all international investors, after a week of collaboration with Ariadne, issued statements enhancing the group's credit rating, reinvesting and expressing unwavering confidence in the new leadership. Small-scale investors awakened to the news. Ariadne is at the helm. Purchase immediately. The Sterling Group stock surged from its nada, hitting its maximum daily trading limit. The subsequent day, another limit was reached. The day after that, another. Within a mere week, the Sterling Group was not only salvaged, but emerged stronger than ever before. Its market capitalization even surpassed the zenith achieved during Grandfather Thorin's tenure, and gracing the covers of newsstands worldwide, a striking, beautiful, dark visage appeared on the cover of Forbes magazine. The image depicted Zanaya Vance, attired in a white suit within the CEO's office, gazing out over the Atlanta cityscape. The headline read, "Humiliated Wife Becomes Queen of Finance, The Extraordinary Odyssey of Ariadne." Concurrently with Zanaya Vance's ascent to the pinnacle of prominence, others were relegated to the lowest strata of society. Diane awoke in the hospital. The shock of losing 51% of the shares and the realization that the Sterling family fortune no longer belonged to her had nearly induced a stroke. But the true devastation was yet to unfold. When she attempted to contact her son, her calls went unanswered. She telephoned the butler at the estate. Manuel, prepare the vehicle to come and collect me. I wish to return home. On the other end of the line, a moment of silence ensued. Mrs. Diane, I have been dismissed. President Vance has terminated all the long-standing employees. What? Diane was utterly dumbfounded. And you cannot return either, Manuel replied, his voice laced with apprehension. The new president's security detail has secured the mansion. They claim the property now belongs to the company. It serves as the residence for the acting CEO. You no longer possess any right to be there. Lies, Diane shrieked. That is the Sterling family residence. No, ma'am. It was acquired with group funds. The call was abruptly terminated. Diane descended into a state of panic. She attempted to settle her hospital bill with her credit card. Card blocked, the nurse informed her. Blocked? Impossible. I possess millions. Ma'am, your card is an ancillary card linked to Mr. Jamal Sterling's account. All of Mr. Sterling's assets have been frozen by judicial decree pending the fraud investigation. Your card has also been deactivated. Diane stood paralyzed. No home, no funds, no son. From a woman of immense wealth, she had been reduced to a state of destitution in a single day. She was left with no alternative. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing steadily louder. 2 police vehicles entered the garage and halted adjacent to them. 4 uniformed officers alighted. Kiana Sorrell, a senior officer, announced. Kiana turned, her complexion devoid of all color. We have received a complaint accompanied by comprehensive evidence. You are under arrest on suspicion of embezzlement and money laundering. Please accompany us. No, no. Kiana shook her head wildly. It is false. Zena Vance, you are slandering me. She attempted to flee, but 2 officers swiftly apprehended her and immediately placed her in handcuffs. Poisonous witch. Kiana screamed at Zanaya, You will not find peace. Jamal will not forgive you. Jamal? Zanaya drew nearer and whispered in her ear. He can scarcely save himself. Oh, and I nearly forgot to mention. She looked at Kiana and offered a smile. That slap you delivered to me on the rainy night. I shall ensure you vividly recall it every single day for the next 10 years you spend in jail. Kiana stood stunned and then erupted into a frenzy of mad screams as they escorted her towards the police car. Zanaya watched the police car recede, its sirens blaring. She returned to her Bentley. Assistant Chen, back to the company. We still have a substantial amount of work to accomplish. Pride, a haughty demeanor, all of it vanished when faced with unvarnished truth. She hailed a taxi, concocting a story for the driver about a forgotten purse, and directed him to the Sterling Tower. She stormed into the lobby, now gleaming and orderly, under the watch of a new security detail. I need to speak with Zanaya Vance. I am her mother-in-law. Grant me access, she cried, disheveled and utterly dejected. The new security personnel, unfamiliar with her, barred her path. Madam, you do not possess an appointment. Kindly step aside. How dare you? I am Mrs. Sterling. The ensuing disturbance reached the executive suite on the 68th floor. Zanaya's new assistant observed the security feed. President Vance, there's an older woman creating a scene in the lobby. She claims to be the former CEO's mother. Zanaya, who had been engrossed in a financial document, looked up, her expression hardening. Allow her to ascend. Meeting room number 3. 10 minutes later, Diane was escorted to the 68th floor. She was ushered into the CEO's office, the door closing behind her. She had occupied this space numerous times previously, but today it felt alien, stark, minimalist, and imposing. And seated behind her son's immense desk was Zanaya Vance. The instant she saw Zanaya, Diane ceased her outcry. This was, she knew, her final recourse. She surged forward but stopped short of the desk. With a thud, she collapsed onto the floor. Zanaya, she wailed, tears and mucus mingling. My daughter-in-law, Mommy. Mommy was mistaken. I am a foolish old woman. I implore your pardon. Zanaya calmly turned a page in her report, her gaze unwavering. Mrs. Sterling, whom did you address me as? Daughter-in-law. You are the daughter-in-law of the Sterling lineage. You are still Jamal's wife.